My cat brought home a Bobcat Cub and the note tied to its collar changed everything. At first, it looked like a strange prank, until the words became a cry for help, a desperate voice, warning about a man in a green truck. Suddenly, a quiet life turned into a nightmare of danger, hidden trails, and secrets buried in the desert. Why would someone trust a wild animal to carry their only hope of survival? Who wrote the note? And what dark power is willing to silence them forever? When the truth claws its way to the surface, one ordinary woman will face a choice that could save a life or cost her own. So tell me, what would you do if a wild creature carried a secret that could destroy everything? Before we dive in, drop a quick hello in the comments. Maybe your name, maybe your city. Every reply reminds me this isn't just my voice, but our space. The Arizona sun hung low on the horizon, painting the desert landscape in warm shades of orange and pink. Evelyn Harper sat alone at her kitchen table, picking at her dinner while gazing out the window at the scattered saguaro cacti that dotted her property. The quiet of the evening was familiar after 3 years of living alone. Since her husband's passing, a sudden thump at the back door made her jump. Her orange tabby cat, Jasper, had a habit of bringing her gifts, usually in the form of unfortunate desert mice. With a weary sigh, Evelyn pushed back her chair and walked to the door, bracing herself for another tiny casualty to clean up. What she saw instead made her gasp. Jasper stood proudly beside what appeared to be a baby bobcat, its spotted fur dusty. From the desert floor, the wild cub lay still, but breathing, clearly exhausted. Around its neck was something that looked decidedly unnatural, a piece of paper tied with twine. "Oh, my goodness," Evelyn whispered, her heart racing. She knelt down slowly, careful not to startle either cat. The Bobcat Cub was small, probably only a few months old, and seemed tired to resist as she gently touched its neck. Her fingers trembled as she untied the twine. The paper was crumpled but intact, and what she read made her blood run cold. "If you're reading this, I'm in danger. Don't trust the man in the green truck. This has to be some kind of joke," Evelyn said aloud, though her voice quavered. Jasper meowed and rubbed against her leg, seemingly proud of his unusual discovery. Looking more closely at the cub, Evelyn noticed angry red marks beneath its fur where the makeshift collar had been. Someone had tied this note rather roughly around the poor creature's neck. This was no light-hearted prank. The Bobcat Cub whimpered softly as she examined the marks, and her maternal instincts kicked in despite her fear. "Come here, little one," she murmured, carefully scooping up the cub. It was lighter than she expected, probably hungry and dehydrated. As she carried it inside, a memory flashed through her mind. The green pickup truck she'd seen yesterday, parked across from the elementary school where she worked as a secretary. At the time, she'd merely noted it as unfamiliar in their small community. Now, that observation took on a more sinister tone. Setting the cub down on a soft towel in her laundry room, Evelyn's hands shook as she filled a shallow bowl with water. Her mind raced with possibilities, none of them good. Who would send a message this way? Who was in danger? And why did they choose a wild animal as their messenger? The bobcat lapped weakly at the water, while Evelyn paced her kitchen, the note clutched in her hand. She'd lived a quiet, predictable life since losing her husband. The most excitement she usually faced was breaking up playground squabbles, or helping lost kindergartners find their classrooms. Now here she was, holding what might be a cry for help from someone in real danger. "What should I do?" she asked Jasper, who had settled nearby to watch his wild cousin drink. The tabby just blinked at her slowly, offering no answers. She could call the police. But what would she tell them? That her house cat dragged home a bobcat with a mysterious note? They'd probably think she was crazy. Besides, the warning about the green truck made her hesitate. What if the wrong people found out she had received the message? Evelyn sank into her kitchen chair, feeling the weight of responsibility settle onto her shoulders. If someone really was in danger, could she live with herself if she ignored their plea for help? But if she chose to get involved, what could she, a middle-aged widow who lived alone, possibly do to help? The Bobcat Cub had finished drinking and was now curled up on the towel, its small chest rising and falling with each breath. Looking at its injured neck, Evelyn felt a surge of protective anger. Someone had used this innocent creature, hurt it even, to send their message. That same someone might be depending on her now. She smoothed out the crumpled note on her kitchen table, studying the hurried handwriting. The paper looked like it had been torn from a notebook, the edges ragged and uneven. There was a sense of desperation in those hastily scrawled words that she couldn't ignore. The sun had fully set now, leaving Evelyn in the growing darkness with her unexpected charges, one domestic cat, one wild cub, and one mysterious message that threatened to upend her carefully ordered life. As she sat there, Her mind kept returning to that green truck, parked so innocently near the school. Had the driver been watching? Waiting? The thought sent a chill down her spine despite the lingering desert heat. Lord, give me wisdom, she whispered, a prayer she'd repeated often since losing her husband. But this time, instead of asking for guidance through her grief, she was asking for something entirely different, the courage to either act on this strange message, or the peace to let it go. The next morning, Evelyn's hands trembled as she gripped the steering wheel of her aging sedan, driving toward the sheriff's office. The mysterious note sat heavy in her purse, and her mind kept returning to the injured Bobcat Cub she'd left safely confined in her laundry room. The sheriff's office was a small brick building with faded lettering on the window. Inside, the air conditioning hummed weakly against the Arizona heat. Sheriff Miller barely looked up from his computer as Evelyn approached his desk. "What can I do for you, Mrs. Harper?" he asked, his tone suggesting he'd rather be doing anything else. Evelyn pulled out the crumpled note with shaking fingers. "I found this last night," she began, explaining about Jasper bringing home the Bobcat Cub and the strange message. As she spoke, she could hear how fantastic it all sounded. Sheriff Miller's expression shifted from boredom to barely concealed amusement. A note, tied to a wild animal. He leaned back in his chair, which creaked under his weight. "And you think this is some kind of cry for help?" The cub had marks on its neck where the paper was tied. Evelyn insisted. "And I saw a green truck, Mrs. Harper," he cut her off. "You know how many green trucks there are in this county. Besides, who in their right mind would send a message by Bobcat?" He chuckled, shaking his head. "Sounds like someone's idea of a practical joke." Heat rose in Evelyn's cheeks. "But what if someone really is in trouble?" "Look," he said, his voice taking on the tone one might use with a child. "I appreciate you trying to be a good citizen, but we've got real crimes to deal with. My advice, forget about it. And you should probably call animal control about that bobcat." Evelyn left the sheriff's office feeling foolish and small. The morning sun seemed to mock her, bright and harsh against her tears of frustration. She'd known they might not take her seriously, but the dismissal still stung out almost without thinking. She found herself driving toward Calvin Riggs's place on the outskirts of town. Calvin had been her husband's best friend, and though they didn't speak often since the funeral, she knew he was someone who listened more than he spoke. His modest ranch house came into view, the front yard neat despite the surrounding desert wilderness. Calvin was on his porch, working on what looked like a hunting rifle. He set it aside as she pulled up, his weathered face showing concern at her unexpected visit. "Evelyn," he stood, wiping his hands on a rag. "Everything all right?" The simple question, asked with genuine concern, nearly undid her. "I'm sorry to bother you, Calvin, but something strange happened, and I didn't know where else to go." "Come on in," he said, holding the screen door open. "I'll put some coffee on." Inside, Calvin's house was cool and dimly lit. While he busied himself with the coffee maker, Evelyn told her story again, this time to someone who didn't interrupt her smirk. When she mentioned the green truck, Calvin's hands stilled on the coffee cups. "What kind of green truck?" he asked quietly. "An older model pickup, dark forest green with a dent in the passenger door." Calvin's face grew serious. "Wyatt Dane drives a truck like that. Seen it plenty of times up by the canyon lands he's trying to buy up." Wyatt Dane. The name sent a chill through her despite the coffee's warmth. "The land developer?" Calvin nodded, grimly. "Man's got a reputation, none of it good. Folks who stand in his way tend to have accidents or suddenly decide to sell their land for pennies on the dollar." He leaned forward. "Evelyn, if this is something to do with Dane, you might have stumbled onto something serious." Evelyn's hands tightened around her coffee cup. "The sheriff thought I was being silly. Miller's got his head in the sand when it comes to Dane," Calvin said. "Too many powerful people involved." He studied her face. "You're scared." "Of course I'm scared," she admitted. "I'm just a school secretary, Calvin. I don't know anything about land developers or corruption or," she gestured helplessly. "You're also one of the strongest women I know," Calvin said firmly. "Jack saw that in you, even if you don't see it yourself." The mention of her late husband brought fresh tears to her eyes, but Calvin wasn't finished. "Someone reached out to you for help, Evelyn. Used a wild animal because they were desperate enough to try anything. Maybe it's nothing to do with Dane, but my gut says different." He reached across the table and patted her hand. "Whatever you decide to do, you're not alone in this." Those words, spoken with such quiet conviction, gave Evelyn her first real sense of hope since finding the note. Someone believed her. Someone was willing to help. She wasn't just an overlooked widow imagining things. "What should we do?" she asked, drawing strength from Calvin's steady presence. First, he said, "We need to keep that Bobcat safe. It's evidence of sorts." Then we start watching and listening. Dane's careful, but everyone makes mistakes. He gave her a reassuring smile. "And you keep coming to me if anything else happens. Promise." Evelyn nodded, feeling the isolation of the past 24 hours beginning to lift. Whatever was happening, whatever danger lurked behind that mysterious message, at least she didn't have to face it alone anymore. The early morning air was crisp as Evelyn and Calvin made their way along the canyon trails. They had started their investigation at dawn, hoping to avoid both the afternoon heat and unwanted attention. Calvin moved with the quiet confidence of someone who had spent a lifetime reading the desert's subtle signs. "See these tracks here?" He pointed to faint impressions in the hard-packed earth. "Someone's been through here recently. Small feet, probably a child or young teenager." Evelyn's heart quickened. They had been searching for 3 hours, following Calvin's hunches about where someone might hide in the vast canyon system. The terrain was rough, with loose rocks and thorny brush that caught at their clothes. "Over there." Calvin gestured toward a natural alcove formed by overhanging rock. "Looks like someone made camp." They approached carefully. The site was partially hidden from the main trail, and Evelyn could see why someone might choose it for shelter. The rock formation provided protection from wind and rain, while offering a clear view of anyone approaching. Scattered belongings told the story of a hasty departure. A thin blanket lay crumpled in the corner. Empty water bottles and food wrappers had been stuffed into a plastic bag, showing attempts to keep the site tidy. But it was the worn spiral notebook that caught Evelyn's attention. She picked it up with trembling hands. The cover was decorated with small hearts and stars drawn in blue ink. Inside, the handwriting was neat, but clearly young, the kind she saw every day at school. "Calvin," she called softly, "look at this." The journal entries were brief and increasingly worried. "Dad says we have to leave soon. He won't tell me why, but I heard him arguing with someone on the phone about the property. That man in the green truck came again. Dad was really upset after. We're supposed to pack tonight. Dad says it's not safe anymore." The last entry ended mid-sentence, as if the writer had been interrupted. "It wasn't a hoax," Evelyn whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "There really is a girl out there who needs help." Calvin examined the campsite with growing concern. "This matches what I've been hearing about Dane. He's been buying up land all around the canyon, piece by piece. Some sales seem legitimate, but others," he shook his head. "Folks just suddenly decide to sell and leave town. No warning, no goodbyes. How does he get away with it? Money talks. And when it doesn't, fear does the job." Calvin's weathered face was grim. "He's careful, though. Nothing can ever be proven." Evelyn hugged the journal to her chest. What kind of man forces families from their homes? The kind who thinks his bank account puts him above the law. Calvin carefully surveyed their surroundings. "We should go. Been here too long already." The walk back was tense, both of them lost in thought. Evelyn couldn't stop thinking about the girl who had written in that journal. Someone's daughter, someone's student, perhaps even someone she had smiled at in the school hallways without knowing their troubles. The next day at work, Evelyn's fears were confirmed. She was gathering her things to leave when she glanced out the school's front window. There, parked across the street, was a dark green pickup truck with a distinctive dent in the passenger door. Her hands went cold as she watched it idle there, like a predator waiting to strike. She fumbled for her phone, snapping a quick picture before the truck pulled away. The image was clear enough to make out the license plate. "I saw him, Calvin," she said later, showing him the photo. "He was watching the school. What if he knows we were at the campsite?" Calvin studied the picture. Could be coincidence. Could be warning. Either way, we need to be more careful. He looked at her seriously. "You can still walk away from this, Evelyn. No one would blame you." The journal sat heavily in her bag, its young owner's words echoing in her mind. Someone had reached out to her specifically, trusting her to help. Walking away might be safer. But could she live with herself knowing she had abandoned a child to whatever fate Wyatt Dane had planned? "I can't," she said quietly. "I keep thinking about that girl, Calvin, about how scared she must have been to risk sending a message with a wild animal. How desperate her family must be." She straightened her shoulders. "I have to help. I don't know how." Calvin nodded, as if he had expected this answer. "Then we keep digging, but carefully. Dane's dangerous, but he's not all-powerful. Everyone leaves traces, makes mistakes. We just have to find them." Looking at the determination in Calvin's eyes, Evelyn felt a mix of gratitude and fear. The situation was bigger and more dangerous than she had imagined. But at least she wasn't facing it alone. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The desert night wrapped around Evelyn's car like a dark blanket as she drove home from a late parent-teacher conference. Her headlights carved a lonely path through the darkness, and the radio played softly to keep her company. It was nearly 10 o'clock, and the winding canyon road was empty except for her sedan. Until she saw the headlights in her rearview mirror dot at first, she paid them little attention. But as the vehicle drew closer, its high beams blazing, her heart began to race. The truck, she could make out its shape now, was gaining on her quickly. The green pickup suddenly swerved into the oncoming lane and pulled alongside her. Evelyn's hands tightened on the steering wheel as she recognized the dented passenger door. The truck edged closer, forcing her toward the shoulder. No, she whispered, fighting to keep control as her tires hit the gravel. The truck lurched toward her, metal screaming against metal. Evelyn jerked the wheel hard, barely missing a guardrail. Her car fishtailed, sending pebbles flying into the darkness below. Just as suddenly as it had appeared, the truck roared ahead and vanished around the next bend, leaving Evelyn trembling in her damaged car. She pulled over, her whole body shaking as she fumbled for her phone. Calvin, her voice cracked. He tried to run me off the road. Stay there, Calvin said firmly. I'm coming to get you. 20 minutes later, Calvin's weathered pickup pulled up behind her. He examined the long scratch along her car's driver's side, his face hard with anger. This wasn't a warning, he said quietly. He meant to hurt you. Evelyn hugged herself, still trembling. Why? Because we found that campsite. Because Dane doesn't leave loose ends. Calvin helped her into his truck, and he thinks you're becoming one. Back at her house, Calvin made them both strong coffee while Evelyn tried to stop her hands from shaking. The familiar surroundings of her kitchen offered little comfort now. I've been asking around, Calvin said, sitting across from her, about families Dane's pressured out of their land. Most folks won't talk. But I kept hearing one name, Calloway. Evelyn frowned. Wait, Sierra Calloway. She was in my office last year, registering for classes. Her father owned the Double C Ranch, prime land that Dane wanted. When Marcus Calloway refused to sell, Calvin paused. The whole family disappeared 3 months ago. Everyone assumed they'd been forced out like the others. But what if they weren't? Evelyn's mind raced. The journal at the campsite, that handwriting. It could have been Sierra's. The timing fits, and that would explain the Bobcat Cub. The Calloways were known for rehabilitating wild animals. Sierra would know how to handle one. Evelyn remembered Sierra, a quiet, clever girl with long dark hair and determined eyes. She had seemed older than her 17 years, already carrying adult worries on young shoulders. If she's out there alone, Evelyn's voice trailed off. She survived this long, Calvin said. That girl's got her daddy's strength, but she must have reached out to you for a reason. Because I'm safe, Evelyn realized, just a school secretary. Someone Dane wouldn't suspect. She stood up and walked to her window, staring into the darkness. But he does suspect now, and he's made it clear what happens to people who get in his way. Calvin watched her carefully. You've got a choice to make, Evelyn. No one would blame you for walking away. This isn't your fight. Evelyn touched the fresh scrapes on her car. Key, evidence of how close she'd come to disaster. The smart choice would be to step back, to let it go. But then she thought of Sierra, alone in the desert, desperate enough to trust her life to a wild animal and a stranger's kindness. It became my fight the moment the Bobcat Cub came through my door. She said quietly, I can't abandon her, Calvin. I just can't. Then we do this smart, Calvin said. Dane's dangerous, but he's not invincible. We gather evidence, build a case that can't be ignored, but we do it carefully. He reached across the table and squeezed her hand. And we do it together. Evelyn nodded, drawing strength from his steady presence. The night's terror had shaken her, but it had also strengthened her resolve. Somewhere out there, Sierra Calloway was hiding, waiting, hoping that someone would be brave enough to help. And Evelyn had made her choice. She would not let that hope die. The morning sun filtered through Evelyn's kitchen window as she and Calvin spread documents across her table. Property records, old newspaper clippings, and a worn map of the canyon lands created a paper trail of Wyatt Dane's growing empire. Here's where it started, Calvin said, pointing to a yellowed article. 10 years ago, Dane bought his first ranch in the canyon. Since then, he's acquired 16 more properties. His weathered finger traced a pattern across the map, including 3 that belonged to families who seemed to just vanish. Evelyn studied a deed with Marcus Calloway's signature. Something about it bothered her. This doesn't look right, she murmured, pulling out a permission slip Sierra had signed at school last year. She laid them side by side. Look at these signatures. The one on the deed, the strokes are different. Calvin leaned in closer. Forged work, he said grimly. Good enough to fool most folks, but not perfect. Dane's been manufacturing proof of sales that never happened. But why hasn't anyone noticed? Evelyn asked, frustration edging her voice. Records have a way of disappearing at the county office when Dane's involved, and folks who ask too many questions. He didn't need to finish the thought. A soft thump at the back door interrupted them. The Bobcat Cub sat there, peering through the glass, this time. It carried a scrap of faded blue fabric. That's the third time this week, Evelyn said softly. Different locations, but always when we're working on this. She opened the door carefully, but the cub darted away, leaving the fabric behind. Calvin examined the scrap denim, worn thin, like from a favorite pair of jeans. Sierra's telling us she's alive, Evelyn realized, her heart pounding. She's watching, using the cub to communicate. She remembered Sierra's file from school, her special interest in wildlife rehabilitation. Just as Calvin had mentioned, they spent the afternoon piecing together the Calloway family's final days. Marcus had been vocal about refusing Dane's offers, even gathering evidence of illegal property seizures. Then came threatening phone calls, vandalism, and finally that night in March when neighbors reported hearing shots at the Double C Ranch. By morning, the Calloways were gone. The sheriff claimed they fled town, Calvin said, disgust clear in his voice. Said Marcus signed over the deed before leaving, but Sierra stayed behind somehow. Smart girl. She knew running meant losing everything her family fought for. Evelyn touched the fabric scrap. She's been surviving in the canyon all this time, watching Dane, maybe gathering proof. Her voice softened. All alone, just a teenager. A shadow crossed Calvin's face. Dane's got friends in every office that matters. Sierra must have realized she needed someone outside his influence. Someone who'd listen. But why me? Evelyn wondered. Because you treated her kindly, Calvin said simply. I've asked around the school. You're the one who noticed when she was struggling with her mother's illness last year. The one who made sure she had lunch money when times were tight. Tears pricked at Evelyn's eyes as she remembered Sierra's quiet thank you those days. Her determined pride even when accepting help. The Bobcat Cub appeared again at dusk. This time at Evelyn's bedroom window. It carried nothing, but its presence felt deliberate. A reminder that Sierra was out there, waiting, trusting. The authorities abandoned her, Evelyn said, watching the cub disappear into the growing darkness. Everyone who should have protected her either looked the other way or helped Dane instead. Her voice strengthened with resolve. I won't do that. I can't. Calvin squeezed her shoulder. Then we keep digging. We document everything. The forged signatures, the pattern of vanishing. Families, every piece of evidence Sierra sends us through that cub. We build a case to solid for even Dane's influence to bury. Evelyn nodded, gathering the papers with new purpose. The scared, uncertain widow who had first found that note seemed like a different person now. In her place stood a woman who had found her courage in the face of corruption, who would not rest until justice was done. Sierra trusted me to help her, she said quietly. And I will, no matter what it takes. Evelyn's fingers trembled as she entered her login credentials at the school's computer terminal. The empty building felt eerie after hours, but she knew this might be her only chance. As the administrative system hummed to life, she navigated to the student records, grateful for her years of experience as school secretary. Sierra Calloway, she whispered, clicking through to the family's information. There it was, the original proof of residence documentation, including property deed numbers that predated Dane's claims. She quickly printed everything, her heart racing at every sound in the darkened hallways. While the printer whirred, she discovered more. Other families who had disappeared, their children's records showed similar patterns. Changed addresses, sudden withdrawals, all coinciding with Dane's land acquisitions. She printed these too, building a paper trail of his systematic takeover. The school phone rang, making her jump. She let it go to voicemail, but then her cell phone buzzed. It was Calvin. Someone's following me, he said without preamble, his voice tense. Out by Red Rock past vehicles, moving fast. Get out of there, Evelyn urged, gathering the printed papers with shaking hands. Too late for that, listen. If anything happens, a crash interrupted him, followed by the screech of metal on metal. Evelyn, the proof isn't my. The line went dead. Calvin. Evelyn clutched the phone, terror freezing her in place. Then training kicked in, years of emergency drills at the school. She forced herself to think clearly. She needed to get home, get her husband's rifle, and find Calvin. The drive home was a blur of anxiety. She kept trying Calvin's number, but it went straight to voicemail. as she pulled into her driveway. Headlights swept across her house from two directions. Her stomach dropped. Black SUVs were boxing her in. Evelyn didn't hesitate. She abandoned her car, sprinting for the back door. Inside, she headed straight for the gun safe, her fingers flying over the combination lock. Behind her, heavy boots thundered up her porch steps. The rifle felt solid in her hands as she loaded it, just like Tom had taught her. She positioned herself with a clear view of both entrances, keeping her breathing steady despite her pounding heart. The door burst open. Two men in dark clothes entered, their own weapons raised. "Mrs. Harper," one called out, his voice falsely pleasant. "Mr. Dane just wants to talk." "Stay back," Evelyn warned, her rifle aimed and ready. "I know what Dane did to the Callaways." Movement caught her eye, the Bobcat Cub, slipping through the cat door she'd installed. It carried something metallic this time, a key on a leather cord. Evelyn recognized it instantly as Calvin's spare truck key. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," the second man said, taking a step forward. Evelyn fired a warning shot into the floor between them. The men jumped back, and she seized her chance. In one fluid motion, she snatched up the key and the Cub, then bolted for the back door. Gunshots exploded behind her as she ran into the desert night. The Cub squirmed but didn't struggle, as if understanding the danger. Evelyn's legs burned as she pushed herself harder, hearing shouts and footsteps in pursuit. Calvin's truck was where he always parked it, hidden behind a stand of Joshua trees quarter-mile from her house. Her hands shook as she unlocked it, practically throwing herself and the Cub inside. The engine roared to life just as flashlight beams cut through the darkness. More shots rang out. The rear window shattered. Evelyn ducked low over the steering wheel as she floored the accelerator, the truck bouncing wildly over the rough terrain. She didn't slow down until the lights behind her had faded completely. Only then did she let herself think about Calvin. Injured, maybe worse. Somewhere out in the vast desert, she clutched the steering wheel tighter, fighting back tears. The Cub pressed against her leg, its presence both a comfort and a reminder of everything at stake. The truck's headlights caught something ahead, fresh skid marks leading off the road. Evelyn followed them carefully, her heart in her throat. There, at the bottom of a shallow ravine, she found Calvin's vehicle, its side caved in from impact. "Calvin," she called out, scanning the area with the truck's lights. No response. The Cub suddenly perked up, then leaped through the broken rear window. Evelyn watched it disappear into a cluster of rocks. After a moment's hesitation, she grabbed her rifle and followed. She found Calvin propped against a boulder, conscious but badly bruised. Blood matted his silver hair where he'd hit his head. "Knew you'd figure it out," he said weakly. "Sierra's been leaving me keys too." "Smart girl. Don't talk," Evelyn said, helping him to his feet. "We need to move. Dane's men are right behind me." "The evidence," Calvin started. "I got it. School records, property documents, everything." She guided him toward the truck. "But we can't fight them alone anymore. We need help." The Cub followed them back to the vehicle, watching intently as Evelyn helped Calvin into the passenger seat. As she started the engine again, she caught movement in her mirrors, more headlights appearing on the distant road. "Hold on," she told both Calvin and the Cub as she pointed the truck toward the deeper desert. She didn't know exactly where they were going, but she knew they couldn't stop. Not with Dane's men behind them, and somewhere ahead, a teenage girl who had trusted Evelyn to be braver than she'd ever thought possible. The desert night wrapped around Evelyn like a cold blanket. As she sat in Calvin's truck, parked deep in a hidden arroyo, her flashlight beam fell on Calvin's sleeping form in the passenger seat. The makeshift bandage around his head needed changing, but she hesitated to wake him. Every small movement seemed to cause him pain. The Bobcat Cub curled in her lap, unusually still. Its presence was both a comfort and a reminder of her failures. Evelyn stroked its fur, her fingers trembling. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, though she wasn't sure if she was speaking to the Cub, to Calvin, or to Sierra, the girl she still couldn't find. Tears welled up in her eyes as exhaustion and doubt crashed over her. What was she doing out here? She was just a school secretary, not some hero. Her amateur investigation had only made things worse. Calvin was hurt because of her. And Sierra. What if Dane's men found the girl because they were following Evelyn's clumsy attempts to help? "I can't do this," she murmured, her voice breaking. "I'm just putting everyone in more danger." The Cub stirred suddenly, pawing at its neck. Evelyn frowned, noticing something different about its collar. With gentle fingers, she explored the worn leather and found a new fold she hadn't seen before. Her heart jumped as she carefully extracted a small piece of paper. Under the flashlight's glow, she unfolded the note. The handwriting was hurried but familiar from the journal they'd found at the campsite. I saw you escape from your house. You fought back against them. I knew you were different, knew you'd understand why I had to run. Please don't give up. You're the only one who believed enough to look for me. The only one who can help me prove what Dane did to my family. I'm still hiding, but I'm watching. I trust you. Evelyn read the words 3 times, her vision blurring with fresh tears, but these were different. The weight of hopelessness lifted slightly from her shoulders. Sierra was alive. Sierra had seen her. Sierra trusted her. What is it? Calvin's voice was rough with pain as he stirred beside her. Another note from Sierra, Evelyn said, passing it to him. She's been watching us, Calvin. All this time, she's been making sure we're the right people to trust. Calvin read slowly, the flashlight trembling in his injured hand. Smart girl, he said finally. Dangerous game she's playing, but smart, using the cub to test us, watching. How we handled it. I almost gave up, Evelyn admitted. I was ready to call the sheriff. Tell him everything, even if he didn't believe us. But Sierra's been out here alone for so long, trusting no one. She chose us, Calvin. She's counting on us. The cub stretched and moved to the truck's back window, staring intently into the darkness. Its behavior reminded Evelyn of all the times it had appeared just when they needed guidance. Sierra must have trained it somehow, using it as her eyes and ears. Dane thinks he's untouchable, Calvin said, wincing as he shifted in his seat. Thinks money and fear will keep everyone quiet forever. But he's never faced someone like you. Evelyn, like me. She almost laughed. I'm nobody special. That's exactly why you're dangerous to him. He expects people to either want something from him or be afraid of him. You're just trying to do what's right. No agenda. No price tag. Calvin's eyes, despite the pain clouding them, held fierce pride. Tom would be proud of you. The mention of her late husband sent a warm current through Evelyn's chest. Tom had always believed in standing up for what was right, no matter the cost. Maybe that's what she'd been doing all along, not trying to be a hero, just refusing to look the other way when someone needed help. She pulled out the school records she'd managed to grab during her escape. Property deeds, tax documents, correspondence that proved Dane's fraud. We have evidence now, she said, her voice stronger. Real proof of what he's done. We just need to find Sierra and get her somewhere safe so she can tell her story. The cub's ears perked up, and it made a soft chirping sound. Evelyn had learned to pay attention to its signals. I think, she said slowly, Sierra might be closer than we realize. She's watching, waiting to see if we'll keep fighting. Calvin nodded. Then we don't let her down. He grimaced but sat up straighter. We need to move at first light. Dane will have men searching every road. We'll stay off the roads, Evelyn said, surprising herself with her certainty. You taught me enough about tracking. It's time to use those skills to help Sierra lead us to her. The cub settled back in her lap, purring softly. Outside, the desert. Night was full of shadows, but Evelyn no longer felt lost in them. Somewhere out there, a brave girl was counting on her. And this time, fear wouldn't make her turn away. Dawn was breaking over the canyon when Calvin spread out a weathered map. Across the truck's hood, his movements were stiff, each gesture carefully measured to avoid aggravating his injuries. Still, determination blazed in his eyes. Dane thinks he's got us running scared, Calvin said, tracing a line along the canyon's edge. But he's predictable. Rich men always are. They expect everyone to play by their rules. Evelyn leaned closer, studying the terrain. The morning light painted the desert in shades of gold and rose, but she couldn't appreciate its beauty, not with so much at stake. What's your thinking? See this outcrop? Calvin's finger tapped a spot where the canyon narrowed. It's called Devil's Crown. Only one road in, but there are hiking trails all around it. Perfect spot for an ambush, which is exactly what Dane will expect. So we let him think that's our plan, Evelyn said slowly, beginning to understand. Calvin nodded, a ghost of a smile crossing his weathered face. The cub's been Sierra's messenger. We can use that. Leave a note that makes Dane think we're planning to meet someone there with evidence against him. The Bobcat Cub sat nearby, watching them with unblinking amber eyes. Evelyn had come to believe the animal was far more than just a messenger. It was a bridge between them and Sierra, proof that even the wildest things could choose to trust. Sierra's smart, Evelyn said. She'll understand what we're doing if we word the note carefully. She pulled out a small notepad, her hand steady as she wrote, meeting at Devil's Crown, sunrise. Bringing everything we found. Watch for the signal. Calvin checked her bandaging while she wrote, his touch gentle but clinical. You're sure about this? There's no shame in walking away. Evelyn looked up from the note, meeting his concerned gaze. I stopped being sure about anything the moment that Cub brought me the first message. But I'm certain about one thing. I won't abandon Sierra. Then we do this right. Calvin straightened, ignoring the pain that flickered across his face. Dane will bring men. He'll expect us to hide up high, try to spot them coming. Instead, we'll be down in the canyon itself. He showed her a narrow trail on the map, barely visible among the contour lines. This path leads to a series of caves. Good hiding spots, multiple exits. If Sierra's been watching us like we think, she'll know where to find us. Evelyn studied the route, committing it to memory. And Dane, he'll see exactly what he expects to see, to desperate people trying to outmaneuver him. His ego won't let him send just his men. He'll want to be there, to finish this himself. The cub suddenly perked up, its ears swiveling toward the brush. Evelyn had learned to trust its instincts. They quickly folded the map, but the animal wasn't signaling danger. Instead, it padded over to a nearby juniper tree and pawed at something. Beneath it, Evelyn found another note, this one written on what looked like a page torn from a school notebook. Sierra's words made her heart ache. I see you planning. I know those caves. Been living in them since they came for Dad. I'll be ready. She's close, Evelyn whispered, passing the note to Calvin. She's been watching this whole time. Calvin, read it, his expression softening. Brave kid, to brave for her own good, maybe. He looked at Evelyn. Like someone else I know. Evelyn felt a change coming over her, like a shell cracking open. All her life, she'd been the quiet one, the reliable one, the widow who kept to herself. But protecting Sierra had awakened something else, something that reminded her of Tom's unwavering sense of right and wrong. We need to get moving, she said, gathering their supplies. The sun's getting higher, and we have a lot to prepare. Calvin nodded, checking his rifle before sliding it into its case. Remember what I taught you about desert tracking. Watch the shadows. Look for what's out of place. Sierra will leave signs only we'll recognize. The cub led them to their vehicle, surprisingly patient as they loaded their gear. Evelyn patted its head gently. Find Sierra, she whispered. Tell her we're coming. As if understanding, the animal bounded away into the brush. Evelyn watched it go, then turned to help Calvin into the passenger seat. They had a long drive ahead, and every minute counted. You're not just doing this for Sierra anymore, are you? Calvin asked as they pulled onto the dusty road. Evelyn gripped the steering wheel, thinking of all the people Dane had hurt, all the families he'd driven away. No, she said. I'm doing it because someone has to show him he can't keep taking whatever he wants, even if that someone is just a school secretary and a retired tracker. Calvin's quiet chuckle held both pride and pain. Nothing just about either of us anymore. Evelyn, Dane's about to learn that the hard way. They drove on as the sun climbed higher, the canyon walls rising around them like ancient guardians. Somewhere ahead, Sierra was waiting. Somewhere ahead, Dane was plotting. And somewhere inside herself, Evelyn felt the last traces of fear being replaced by something stronger, the unwavering resolve of a protector. The sun crept over Devil's Crown, painting the canyon walls in shades of amber and rose. Evelyn crouched behind a boulder, her heart steady despite the rifle-toting men spreading out across the rim above. Calvin's presence beside her was reassuring, though she could see the strain of his injuries in the tight lines around his eyes. 6 men, he whispered, barely audible above the morning breeze. Plus Dane. They're doing exactly what we expected. Evelyn nodded, watching Dane's green truck parked prominently at the canyon's edge. The man himself stepped out, looking more annoyed than concerned as he surveyed the terrain below. His expensive boots kicked up dust as he walked to the edge, hands on his hips like a king surveying his domain. Mrs. Harper. Dane's voice boomed across the canyon. Let's end this foolishness. Whatever you think you know, whatever you think you're protecting, it's not worth dying for. Evelyn took a deep breath, remembering the plan. She needed to keep him talking, keep him focused on her. Is that what you told Sierra's father? She called back, her voice clear and controlled. Before you made him disappear. Dane's laugh echoed. Off the rocks, stories and shadows, Mrs. Harper. You've been listening to too many rumors. He gestured to his men. Search the lower trails. They used to think they're clever, hiding down there. Calvin touched Evelyn's arm, signaling. They could hear boots on gravel as Dane's men began descending. Everything was falling into place, but timing would be crucial. I have proof, Mr. Dane. Evelyn projected, moving slightly to keep his attention. Forged deeds, falsified documents. Did you really think no one would notice the dates were wrong? That the signatures didn't match? She saw Dane's posture stiffen, saw his hand move to his jacket, You're making dangerous accusations, widow. Best be sure you can back them up." "Oh, I can." Evelyn felt a flutter of movement behind her. Not Calvin, not Dane's men. Her pulse quickened, but she kept her voice steady. "Would you like to see the originals? I have them right here." Dane's patience visibly snapped. He drew his pistol, no longer playing at civility. "Enough games. Bring me whatever you think you have. Now, put the gun down first," Evelyn demanded, buying precious seconds. "You're not in a position to make demands." Dane's face had reddened with rage. "I've worked too hard, built too much to let some nosy widow and her crippled friend destroy everything." The confession rang out across the canyon, just as Sierra emerged from a hidden crevice. Her camera held high. The device's small red light blinked steadily, recording every word. Dane froze, his eyes widening as he recognized the girl he'd been hunting for months. His gun swung toward her instinctively, but Evelyn was already moving, placing herself between them. "It's over," Sierra called out, her voice stronger than Evelyn had imagined. "I've recorded everything. Every threat, every attack. The day you came for my father. The night you sent your men after Mrs. Harper. It's all here." One of Dane's men shouted a warning, but too late. The distinctive wail of police sirens filled the canyon, growing louder by the second. Vehicles appeared on the access road, dust billowing behind them. "You've lost, Dane," Calvin said, standing. Despite his injuries, the sheriff might have ignored us before, but he can't ignore proof. Dane's composure crumbled completely. He fired wildly, the shot echoing off the canyon walls. Evelyn felt the bullet was past, but she didn't flinch. Sierra ducked behind her, clutching the camera to her chest. The sheriff's voice boomed through a megaphone. "Drop your weapons. This is your only warning." Dane's men, seeing the odds turn, began laying down their guns, but Dane himself backed toward his truck, gun still raised. "This isn't over," he snarled. "You have no idea what I'm capable of." "Actually," Sierra said, her voice steady, "we do. And now everyone else will too." She held up the camera again, its screen glowing in the early morning light. Deputies swarmed down the trails, weapons drawn. Dane looked around frantically, seeing his empire crumbling in real time. His gun wavered between Evelyn and Sierra, desperation replacing his usual arrogance. "Last chance." "Dane," the sheriff called. "Don't make this worse than it already is." For a moment, the canyon held its breath. Then Dane's gun clattered to the ground, and the man himself seemed to shrink, his shoulders slumping as deputies moved in to handcuff him. Evelyn wrapped her arms around Sierra, feeling the girl trembling. Despite her brave face, Calvin limped over to join them, his weathered hand coming to rest protectively on Sierra's shoulder. The sun climbed higher, illuminating the canyon fully now. Deputies led Dane's men away while others gathered evidence, Sierra's camera being handled with special care. The green truck that had once meant terror would now be just another piece of evidence. As the deputies led Wyatt Dane away in handcuffs, the Bobcat Cub emerged from its hiding place in the rocks. It padded over to Evelyn, rubbing against her legs with a soft purr. She bent down to gather it in her arms, marveling at how the small creature had become the lifeline between her and Sierra. "Who would have thought?" she murmured, scratching behind the cub's ears. "Such a tiny messenger carrying such important secrets." Important secrets. Sierra stepped closer, her eyes glistening with tears as she reached out to stroke the cub's fur. "I wasn't sure anyone would believe the notes, but something told me you would understand. Mrs. Harper, something in your eyes when I used to see you at school. You looked as lonely as I felt." The sheriff approached them, his hat in his hands and discomfort evident on his face. "Mrs. Harper, I owe you an apology. When you first came to me about that note," he cleared his throat. "Well, I should have listened." Evelyn met his gaze steadily. There was a time when his dismissal would have crushed her, when his approval would have meant everything. But that woman was gone now, transformed by the events of the past weeks. "What matters is that you're here now," she said simply. The validation she'd once craved from authority figures seemed less important now. She had proven her worth to herself, and that was enough. Calvin limped over, leaning on his walking stick. "The deputies want Sierra's statement," he said, "and they'll need to document everything about Dane's operation." Sierra's hand tightened on Evelyn's arm. "Will you come with me?" "I don't want to do this alone, of course," Evelyn replied without hesitation. The maternal instinct that had driven her to protect Sierra now felt permanent. A bond forged in crisis, but built to last. As they walked toward the waiting officers, Sierra spoke softly. "I lost my mother when I was young. Then my father," her voice caught. "I never thought I'd feel safe with anyone again." Evelyn squeezed her hand. "I know something about loss too. After my husband died, I thought being alone was safer than risking more pain." She smiled gently. We were both wrong about that. The morning sun had fully risen now, warming the canyon walls to a rich gold. Deputies were documenting the scene, photographing evidence, taking statements from Dane's former men. But Evelyn barely noticed the activity around them. She was focused on the young woman beside her, seeing not the frightened girl who had hidden in the wilderness, but a daughter of her heart. What happens now? Sierra asked, uncertainty creeping into her voice. Now, Evelyn said firmly, we build something new, together. She looked down at the Bobcat Cub, still cradled in her arms. All of us. The solitude that had defined her life for so long was giving way to something richer. Connection, purpose, family in its truest sense. She had rediscovered not just her courage, but her capacity for love and protection. The quiet strength that had always been within her had finally found its voice. Calvin watched them with knowing eyes. Looks like that little cub brought more than just messages, he observed. It brought lonely souls together. Evelyn nodded, feeling a deep sense of rightness settle over her. The path ahead would have its challenges, but she was no longer walking it alone and saving Sierra. She had also saved herself from a life half lived in shadows of grief and fear. If even one moment stayed with you, hit subscribe. I'll be back tomorrow with another story written gently for the heart.